Then the Blessed One recited these verses. 130. The fruit of the stream entered, and that of the once to come. The fruit of the not to come and arhatship. All these are due to mental perturbation. 131. The triple vehicle, the one vehicle, and the no vehicle, of these I talk, for the sake of the dull wit, and also for the wise, solitude-loving ones. 132. The gate of highest reality has nothing to do with the two forms of thought construction, subject and object. Where the imageless stands, why should we establish the triple vehicles? 133. The dhyanas, the immeasurables, and the no-form samadhis, and the thought cessation. All these are not at all found in mind only. 22. Again, Mahamati, how is it that the Icchantika one never awakened the desire for emancipation? Notes. 1. What is stated about the group of indefinite character is not quite clear. 2. Those who are destitute of the Buddha nature. End notes. Because they have abandoned all the stock of merit, and because they cherish certain vows for all beings since beginningless time. What is meant by abandoning all the stock of merit? It refers to those Buddhists who have abandoned the Bodhisattva collection of the canonical texts, making the false accusation that they are not in conformity with the sutras, the codes of morality, and the emancipation. By this they have forsaken all the stock of merit and will not enter into nirvana. Secondly again, Mahamati. There are Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who, on account of their original vows made for all beings, saying, so long as they do not attain nirvana, I will not attain it myself, keep themselves away from nirvana. This, Mahamati, is the reason of their not entering into nirvana, and because of this they go on the way of the Icchantika. Again, Mahamati said, who, Blessed One, would never enter nirvana? The Blessed One replied, knowing that all things are in nirvana itself from the very beginning, the Bodhisattva Icchantika would never enter nirvana. But those Icchantikas who have forsaken all the stock of merit finally do. Those Icchantikas, Mahamati, who have forsaken all the stock of merit might someday be influenced by the power of the Tathagatas and be induced at any moment to foster the stock of merit. Why? Because, Mahamati, no beings are left aside by the Tathagatas. For this reason, Mahamati, it is the Bodhisattva Icchantika who never enters into nirvana. 23. Further, Mahamati, let the Bodhisattva Mahasattva be well acquainted with the three kinds of svabhava. What are the three? They are false discrimination, knowledge of relativity, and perfect knowledge. Now, Mahamati, false discrimination rises from form. How, Mahamati, does it rise from form? In the consideration of the relativity aspect of svabhava, realities appear in various ways, as having forms, signs, and shapes. When, Mahamati, these objects, forms, and signs are adhered to as real, this adherence takes place in two ways. The Tathagatas, Arhats, and fully enlightened ones thus declare false discrimination to consist in attachment to names and attachment to objects. By the attachment to objects is meant, Mahamati, to get attached to inner and external things as realities. By the attachment to names is meant to recognize in these inner and external things the characteristic marks of individuality and generality and to regard them as definitely belonging to the objects. These two modes of attachment, Mahamati, constitute false discrimination. The knowledge of the relativity aspect rises from the separation of subject and object. Now, Mahamati, what is perfect knowledge? It is realized when one casts aside the discriminating notions of form, name, reality, and character. It is the inner realization by noble wisdom. This perfect knowledge, Mahamati, is the essence of the Tathagata Garbha. Then the Blessed One recited this verse. 134. Form, name, and discrimination correspond to the two forms of svabhava, and right knowledge and suchness correspond to the perfect knowledge aspect. This Mahamati, is called the doctrine that examines into the nature of the 5 dharmas and the 2 svabhavas, and constitutes the state of self-realization attained by noble wisdom, and in this you and other bodhisattvas are to discipline yourselves. 24. Further again, Mahamati, let the Bodhisattva Mahasattva have a thorough understanding as to the nature of the twofold egolessness. Mahamati, what is this twofold egolessness? It is the egolessness of persons and the egolessness of things. What is meant by egolessness of persons? It means that in the collection of the skandhas, dhatu's, and ayatanas there is no ego substance, nor anything belonging to it. The vijnana is originated by ignorance, deed, and desire, and keeps up its function by grasping objects by means of the sense organs, such as the eye, etc., and by clinging to them as real. While a world of objects and bodies is manifested owing to the discrimination that takes place in the world which is of mind itself, that is, in the alayavijnana. By reason of the habit energy stored up by false imagination since beginningless time, this world is subject to change and destruction from moment to moment. It is like a river, a seed, a lamp, wind, a cloud. While the vijnana itself is like a monkey who is always restless, like a fly who is ever in search of unclean things and defiled places, like a fire which is never satisfied. Again, it is like a water-drawing wheel or a machine, i.e. the vijnana goes on rolling the wheel of transmigration, carrying varieties of bodies and forms, resuscitating the dead like the demon Vatala, causing the wooden figures to move about as a magician moves them. Mahamati, a thorough understanding concerning these phenomena is called comprehending the egolessness of persons. Now, Mahamati, what is meant by the egolessness of things? It is to realize that the skandhas, dhatu's, and ayatanas are characterized with the nature of false discrimination. Mahamati. Since the skandhas, dhatu's, and ayatanas are destitute of an ego substance, being no more than an aggregation of the skandhas, and subject to the conditions of mutual origination which are causally bound up with the string of desire and deed. And since thus there is no creating agent in them, Mahamati, the skandhas are even destitute of the marks of individuality and generality. And the ignorant, owing to their erroneous discrimination, imagine here the multiplicity of phenomena. The wise, however, do not. Recognizing, Mahamati, that all things are devoid of the siddha, manas, manovijnana, the 5 dharmas, and the 3 svabhavas, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva will well understand what is meant by the egolessness of things. Again, Mahamati, when the Bodhisattva Mahasattva has a good understanding as regards the egolessness of things, before long he will attain the first stage of bodhisattvahood when he gets a definite cognition of the imageless. When a definite acquisition is obtained regarding the aspect of the stages of bodhisattvahood, the bodhisattva will experience joy, and, gradually and successively going up the scale, will reach the 9th stage where his insight is perfected, and finally the 10th stage known as Great Dharmamika. Establishing himself here, he will be seated in the great jewel palace known as Great Lotus Throne, which is in the shape of a lotus and is adorned with various sorts of jewels and pearls. He will then acquire and complete a world of Maya nature, surrounded by bodhisattvas of the same character and anointed like the son of the Cakravarti by the hands of the Buddhas coming from all the Buddha lands. He will go beyond the last stage of bodhisattvahood, attain the noble truth of self-realization, and become a Tathagata endowed with the perfect freedom of the Dharmakaya, because of his insight into the egolessness of things. This, Mahamati, is what is meant by the egolessness of all things, and in this you and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas should well exercise yourselves. 25. At that time, Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas said this to the Blessed One. Pray teach me about making an assertion and refuting it so that I and other Bodhisattvas, getting rid of the erroneous views that may rise from assertion and refutation, may at once realize supreme enlightenment. Having been enlightened, they would keep themselves away from the eternalistic assertions as well as from the nihilistic refutations, and leave your enlightenment unrefuted. Then the Blessed One again, understanding the request of Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, recited this verse. 135. Assertions and refutations are not to be found in the mind only. The ignorant who understand not that the mind is seen in the form of body, property, and abode, wander about with assertions and refutations. At that moment the Blessed One said this to elucidate the meaning of this verse. Mahamati, there are 4 forms of assertion made concerning things not in existence. What are the 4? The assertion about individual marks that are non-existent. The assertion about philosophical views which are non-existent, i.e. not true. The assertion about a cause which is non-existent. And the assertion about objects that are non-existent. These, Mahamati, are the 4 assertions. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the refutation? It means not examining properly, because of ignorance, any assertions based on errors. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes assertion and refutation. Further, Mahamati, what are the characteristics of the assertion made about individual marks that have no existence? It concerns the marks of individuality and generality in the skandhas, dhatu's, and ayatanas, which do not really exist. But taking them for realities and getting attached to them, a man may affirm that they are just so and not otherwise. This, Mahamati, characterizes the assertion of individual marks which are non-existent. 1. This assertion and discrimination. Mahamati, concerning individual marks that are not existent, rises from one's attachment to the habit energy which is amassed, since beginningless time, by varieties of erroneous views issuing from false imagination. This, Mahamati, characterizes the assertion of individual marks which are non-existent. Again, Mahamati, by the assertion of philosophical views which are non-existent, i.e. not true, is meant that in the skandhas, dhatu's, and ayatanas, some philosophers assume the existence of an ego, a being, a soul, a living being, a nourisher, or a spirit. This is said, Mahamati, to be the assertion of some philosophical views which are non-existent, i.e. not true. Again, Mahamati, by the assertion of a cause that is non-existent is meant that some philosophers assume the causeless birth of a first Vijnana, which later comes to have a Maya-like non-existence. That is to say, the originally unborn Vijnana begins to function under the conditions of form, light, and memory. The functioning goes on for a while and then ceases. This, Mahamati, is the assertion of a cause that is non-existent. Again, Mahamati, the assertion about objects that are not existent is an assertion arising from the attachment to such non-working existences as space, cessation, and nirvana. These, Mahamati, are neither existent nor non-existent. For all things are devoid of the alternatives of being and non-being and are to be known, Mahamati, as the horns of a hare, a horse, or a camel, or like a hairnet. They are discriminated as realities by the ignorant who are addicted to assertions and refutations as their intelligence has not penetrated into the truth that there is nothing but what is seen of the mind itself. It is otherwise with the wise. This, Mahamati, is the characteristic point of the assertion about objects which are non-existent. For this reason, Mahamati, one should avoid the views based on assertion and refutation. 26. Further, Mahamati, the Bodhisattvas who are thoroughly acquainted with the nature of the Siddha, Manas, and Manovijnana, of the 5 Dharmas, of the 3 Svabhavas, and of the twofold egolessness, will assume various personalities for the sake of benefiting others. Just like the imagination that evolves from the seed of the relativity knowledge, and again, like the mysterious gem that reflects varieties of colors. Going over to all the Buddha lands and assemblages, the Bodhisattvas will listen to the Buddhas discourse on the nature of all things which are like a vision. a dream, an illusion, a reflection, and the lunar vision in water, and which have nothing to do with birth and death, eternally, and extinction. The Bodhisattvas, thus facing the Tathagatas, will listen to their discourses on the truth that does not belong to the Sravaka and Pratyekabuddha vehicle. They will then attain 100,000 samadhis, indeed, 100,000 nyotas of kotas of samadhis, and by means of these samadhis they will go around from one country to another. They will do homage to the Buddhas, be born in all the celestial mansions, where they will discourse on the triple treasure, manifesting Buddha bodies. And, surrounded by Sravakas and Bodhisattvas, they will, in order to free them from the alternatives of being and non-being, instruct them to understand thoroughly what is meant by an objective world which is nothing but mind itself and in which there are no realities. At that time the Blessed One recited this verse. 136. When those who are born of the Buddha see that the world is no more than mind itself, they will obtain a body of transformation, which has nothing to do with effect-producing works, but which is endowed with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control. 27. At that time again Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva made a request of the Blessed One. Tell me, Blessed One, how all things are empty, unborn, non-dual, and have no self-nature, so that I and other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas might be awakened in the teaching of emptiness, no birth, non-duality, and the absence of self-nature, and, quitting the discrimination of being and non-being, quickly realize the highest enlightenment. Then the Blessed One said this to Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. Now, Mahamati, listen well and reflect well upon what I tell you. Replied Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, I will indeed, Blessed One. The Blessed One said, Emptiness, emptiness, indeed. Mahamati, it is a term whose self-nature is false imagination. Because of one's attachment to false imagination, Mahamati, we have to talk of emptiness, no birth, non-duality, and absence of self-nature. In short, then, Mahamati, there are 7 kinds of emptiness. The emptiness of individual marks. The emptiness of self-nature. The emptiness of no work. The emptiness of work. The emptiness of all things in the sense that they are unpredicable. The emptiness in its highest sense of ultimate reality realizable only by noble wisdom, and the emptiness of mutuality which is the 7th. Mahamati, what then is the emptiness of individual marks? It is that all things have no such distinguishing marks of individuality and generality. In consideration of mutuality and accumulation, things are thought to be realities, but when they are further investigated and analyzed, Mahamati, they are non-existent, and not predicable with individuality and generality. And because thus no such ideas as self, other, or both, hold good, Mahamati, the individual marks no longer obtain. So it is said that all things are empty as to their self-marks. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness of self-nature? Mahamati, it is that all things in their self-nature are unborn, hence the emptiness of self-nature, and it is therefore said that things are empty in their self-nature. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness of no work? It is that the skandhas are nirvana itself and there is no work doing in them from the beginning. Therefore, one speaks of the emptiness of no work. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness of work? It is that the skandhas are devoid of an ego and its belongings, and go on functioning when there is a mutual conjunction of cause and action. Thus one speaks of the emptiness of work. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness of all things in the sense that they are unpredicable? It is that the nature of the false imagination is not expressible, hence the emptiness of all things in the sense of their unpredicability. Thus one speaks of the emptiness of unpredicability. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness in its highest sense of ultimate reality realizable by noble wisdom? It is that in the attainment of an inner realization by means of noble wisdom there is no trace of habit energy generated by all the erroneous conceptions of beginningless past. Thus one speaks of the highest emptiness of ultimate reality realizable by noble wisdom. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by the emptiness of mutual non-existence? It is this. When a thing is missing here, one speaks of its being empty there. For instance, Mahamati, in the lecture hall of the Mrigarama there are no elephants, no bulls, no sheep, but as to the bhikshus I can say that the hall is not devoid of them. It is empty only as far as the i.e. the animals are concerned. Further, Mahamati, it is not that the lecture hall is devoid of its own characteristics, nor that the bhikshu is devoid of this bhikshuhood, nor that in some other places, too, elephants, bulls, and sheep are not to be found. Mahamati, here one sees all things in their aspect of individuality and generality, but from the point of view of mutuality some things do not exist somewhere. Thus one speaks of the emptiness of mutual non-existence. These, Mahamati, are the 7 kinds of emptiness of which mutuality ranks the lowest of all and is to be put away by you. Again, Mahamati, not that things are not born, but that they are not born of themselves, except when seen in the state of samadhi. This is what is meant by all things are unborn. To have no self-nature is, according to the deeper sense, to be unborn, Mahamati. That all things are devoid of self-nature means that there is a constant and uninterrupted becoming, a momentary change from one state of existence to another. Seeing this, Mahamati, all things are destitute of self-nature. So one speaks of all things having no self-nature. Again, Mahamati, what is meant by non-duality? It means that light and shade, long and short, black and white, are relative terms, Mahamati, and not independent of each other. As nirvana and samsara are, all things are not too. There is no nirvana except where is samsara. There is no samsara except where is nirvana. For the condition of existence is not of mutually exclusive character. Point 1 Therefore, it is said that all things are non-dual as are nirvana and samsara. For this reason, Mahamati, you should discipline yourself in the realization of emptiness, no birth, non-duality, and no self-nature. Then at that time the Blessed One recited this couplet of verses. 137. I always preach emptiness which is beyond eternalism and nihilism. Samsara is like a dream and a vision, and karma vanishes not. 138. Space, nirvana, and the 2 forms of cessation. Thus the ignorant discriminate the things which are not effect-producing, but the wise stand above being and non-being. At that time again, the Blessed One said this to Mahamati the Bodhisattva Mahasattva. This teaching of emptiness, no birth, non-duality, and no self-nature is found in all the sutras of all the Buddhas, and this doctrine is recognized in every one of them. However, Mahamati, the sutras are the teaching in conformity with the dispositions of all beings and deviate from the real sense, and not the truth-preserving statement. Mahamati, it is like unto the mirage which entices the deer with its treacherous springs. The springs are not there but the deer are attached, imagining them to be real. So with the teachings disclosed in all the sutras, they are for all beings for the gratification of their own discriminating minds. They are not the truth-preserving statements meant for noble wisdom to grasp. For this reason, Mahamati, be in conformity with the sense and be not engrossed in the word teaching. 28.